I saw it happen. Not on the grainy feed of the ship's logs, but right there in the room. I was standing maybe 10 feet away, pressing myself into the bulkhead, trying to be invisible. Empress Valeriana didn't look like a monarch who had just brought 1,000 warships to our doorstep. She looked exposed. She stepped into Elias's personal space, closing the distance until the air between them felt thick enough to choke on. I remember the sound of the atmospheric scrubbers humming, a low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to sync with the sudden, violent beating of my own heart. She reached out slow, deliberate, and placed her hand flat against the center of his chest, right over the ISC insignia. He didn't pull away. Elias, who never let anyone get too close, just stood there frozen. I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the way his eyes searched hers, looking for a trap, but finding only a terrifying open door. "The law requires a consort," she whispered, and her voice wasn't royal thunder. It was just a woman's voice, trembling slightly. "But my heart requires a partner." The heat in the room spiked. You could feel the electric tension, the sheer weight of the galaxy pivoting on whether he leaned in or stepped back. But to understand why a captain of a border patrol boat was standing toe-to-toe with the ruler of the Aethorian Empire, you have to go back just 48 hours, before the gold robes, before the fear. We were drifting on the edge of the exclusion zone aboard the Sentinel. It was a quiet shift. Truth is, we were all bored. Elias was in the command chair, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the starfield like he was looking for answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. He was a good man, Elias, rigid on the outside maybe, but I'd seen him override command protocols just to route power to a civilian transport's life support. Then the sensors screamed. It wasn't an attack. It was a debris field. A small yacht, torn apart, spinning in the dark. Protocol was clear. Do not engage. Do not cross the border. "Captain," the comms officer Jenkins, I think, said, his voice shaking, reading faint life signs, "but it's inside Aethorian space." Elias didn't even blink. He set his cup down with a sharp clack. "Take us in, sir." "That's an act of war," I said. I had to say it. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "And leaving them is an act of cowardice. Helm, bring us alongside." I went with them to the airlock. The smell of the wreckage hit us the moment the seals hissed open ozone, burnt plastics, and something sweet, like scorched sugar. We floated through the twisted corridors, flashlights cutting through the dark. That's when we found her. Lumina. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, trapped under a collapsed bulkhead. She wasn't crying. She was staring right at us with eyes that were entirely too big, swirling with violet light. When Elias knelt beside her, the air in the corridor shifted. I felt a pressure in my temples, a soft, insistent hum. Telepathy. I watched Elias reach out, his gloved hand trembling just a little as he brushed a lock of silver hair from her forehead. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I've got you." The little girl didn't speak. She just reached up and grabbed his finger. And in that second, I saw Elias's posture change. The stiffness vanished. The captain was gone, and something else, something fatherly and fierce, took his place. He lifted the beam off her with a groan of exertion that echoed in the helmet comms, scooping her up like she was made of glass. He didn't know it then, but holding her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever done, because she wasn't just a refugee, and the fleet that was coming for her wasn't looking for a fight. They were looking for a family. Back on the Sentinel, things moved fast. Too fast. We had barely gotten Lumina settled in the medical bay when the proximity alarms dissolved into a single, continuous wail. I ran to the bridge, my boots skidding on the deck plates. When the view screen flickered on, the bridge went dead silent. It wasn't just a ship, it was a horizon of metal. The Aethorian Armada blocked out the stars, a wall of gold and white hulls that shimmered like a mirage. We were a speck of dust floating in front of a hurricane. "They're hailing us," Jenkins whispered. He looked like he was about to be sick, but they didn't fire. Instead, a single shuttle detached from the flagship. When Empress Valeriana boarded, she didn't bring guards. She walked onto our bridge alone. I expected arrogance. I expected a conqueror. But when she saw Elias still wearing his soot-stained jacket, looking exhausted, she stopped. And then Lumina ran in. She shouldn't have been out of bed, but she scrambled past me, past the security officers, and buried her face in Elias's leg. She didn't run to the Empress. She ran to the captain. That's the moment the universe shifted. I saw Valeriana's eyes widen. She looked at the child clinging to Elias, then up at his face. The tension in her shoulders broke. It was a small thing, a release of breath, but in that silence, it sounded like a shout. "The prophecy of the pact," she murmured. "Which brings us back to that room, to the moment she had her hand on his chest. The crew had been dismissed, but I stayed behind to monitor the comms. Or maybe I just couldn't look away. Valeriana hadn't moved her hand. The heat of her palm seemed to ground Elias. "You saved the air," Valeriana said, her voice soft, barely audible over the hum of the ship's drive. "By our law, that makes you her guardian. And by the pact of solace, that makes you my equal." Elias looked down at her hand, then up into her eyes. He looked tired. Not the fatigue of a shift, but the bone-deep weariness of a man who has spent his whole life following orders he didn't believe in. "I'm a soldier, Your Highness," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know how to be a king." "I don't need a king," she countered, stepping closer. Her other hand came up, resting on his arm, her fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket. The distance between them vanished. "I need a father for her, and I need someone who isn't afraid to cross a border to save a life." She looked down, her composure slipping just for a second. "I am surrounded by politicians and admirals, Captain. I am remarkably alone." I saw Elias's throat work as he swallowed. He looked over at the doorway where Lumina was peeking in, watching them with those wide, violet eyes. The little girl sent a thought. I felt it, a warm wash of safety and belonging that smelled like rain, and Elias felt it too. He flinched, then softened. He turned back to Valeriana. Slowly, deliberately, he covered her hand on his chest with his own. The skin-to-skin contact seemed to seal something in the air, a sudden solidity. "Elias," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "My name is Elias," he whispered. "Not captain, not consort, just Elias." A smile broke across her face, not a royal expression, but something genuine and bright. She leaned her forehead against his chin. Just for a moment, a gesture so intimate, I felt like I should turn around, but I didn't. "Then, Elias," she breathed, "let's go home." The galaxy maps would show borders changing the next day. The history books would talk about the Treaty of Solace and the golden age of the Alliance. But I was there. I know the truth. It wasn't politics that stopped the war. It was just a man, a woman, and a little girl, holding on to each other in the quiet dark of a starship.